The Great Wheel by Robert Lawson. Chapter 2. As the good ship City of Bristol listed to the first ocean swell, Con leaned on the rail and took his last look at the lovely green fields of Ireland. For a moment, a great wave of homesickness swept him. He was not alone in this. Along the crowded rail there sounded many a hastily caught sob. Mothers and children wept unashamed. A small, wizened, crooked man next to him pulled down his cap, lit his pipe, and glanced at Con with a keen but friendly eye. "A pretty sight, yon," he said, "coming or going, but better from a real ship under sail. You've no time, then, to be getting sentimental. 'Tis the first time, this, that I've behelt it, and me a passenger. The first time, too, from the deck of one of these belching, stenching tea-kettles. With them a shaking vibration would loosen the teeth of a bronze statue. Steamships," he snorted disgustedly. He slapped a few cinders from his coat sleeve and started forward, walking with a queer, one-sided, crab-like gait. Could it possibly be only yesterday that the letter had come? Only this morning that he and Father Riley had left the village in the misty dawn? His mother, of course, had wept. The children, those who were awake, had joined in without quite knowing why. Grandfather Giblin had screeched admonitions. Aunt Honora, wrapped in a blanket, had called from her window to remember her prophecy. As he and Father Riley stepped briskly down the highway, old Gallagher's Bog was still in shadow. The dim forms of the peat cutters, starting their work, called good wishes. It was a glorious May morning, the sun warm on their backs, the fields dazzling in their greenness. Con, as they left the village behind, threw back his head and sang for the sheer joy of living. Father Riley, when there were no passers-by, joined in with his deep, sonorous voice. "In the eyes of some, it might not be seemly," he chuckled, "but God's birds are singing their throats hoarse, and who are we, the least worthy of his creatures, to be shaming them with a gloomy silence?" In Galway, Con, dazed by the crowds, the thunder of drays, and the shouting of the teamsters, was only dimly aware that Uncle Michael's draft had been cashed. His passage purchased, and he himself completely outfitted in new clothing, boots and linen, all of good quality, modest of cut, and blastedly uncomfortable. A small carpet bag held a few extras, and Father Riley's worn wallet still contained a heartening sum for mother and the young ones. Then suddenly they were on the pier in the midst of a surging, weeping, laughing, calling mob of emigrants, their relatives and well-wishers. They paused a moment in a slight eddy in the lee of a bollard. "My son," said Father Riley, "I have taught you your letters and a bit of figuring. I wish I could have done more. I have taught you the rudiments of civilized behavior, and to honor God and your elders. Now remember this, Ireland may be a poor country, but she exports a crop second to none on earth, her men and women. Never shame her. Take pride in the blood in your veins, in the land of your birth. Now get you aboard, and God go with you." As the gray buildings of Galway shrank in the distance, and the crowd on the pier became a formless dark mass, Con could still make out the tall black figure of the good priest, his hand raised in benediction. Con sat on a hatch as the city of Bristol plodded steadily through the night. He could not quite face the packed, airless steerage. The hard three-tiered bunks, the smell, the weeping, the seasickness that had already begun, although the sea was as calm as the pools in Gallagher's Bog. The crooked little man was seated close by, sucking on his unlit pipe. He fished a short length of light line from his pocket and idly began tying knots, the most complicated, elaborate knots Con had ever seen. He did not look at his work. His eyes wandered about the deck, to the moon-bright horizon, to the dimly lit pilot house, but his hands flashed as rapidly and surely as Antonora's at her weaving. "Would you be a sailor-man, mister?" Con asked finally. The other smiled and lighted his pipe. "I was," he said, "till a fall gave me this one-sided, crabwise carcass. Then no master would sign me on. A.B., they'd say? Able-bodied seaman, you? Sorry, no. Though I could make it to the masthead as quick as the next, the reef, hand, and steer with the best of them. So I took me ashore in the yards at Belfast. A rigger, master rigger now. Many's the fine ship we turned out there, big grain clippers mostly, for the Australian grain trade. Steel hulled, standing rigging, all steel cable, nasty stuff to handle, but strong." "Are you for New York?" asked Con. "Aye," said the little man, "just for the change. Often enough I've called there, but never to stay. I'll have work. There's plenty of real ships to be rigged. There are not all these floating jam factories yet. What of you? New York too?" "Yes, for the now," Con answered. "But I don't know." It was good to have someone to talk to, for Con was lonesome in spite of the packed steerage. He was beginning to learn that there's nothing so lonesome as a crowd. He talked of his life at home, of Mother and Grandfather Giblin and Father Riley and the peat cutting in old Gallagher's bog. He told the little man of Uncle Michael's letter and Uncle Michael's plans for him, and of Aunt Honora's prophecy. "'Tis a grand fortune your aunt has read you," the little man said, "but it must go beyond New York surely, and building sewers. 'Twould be hard to be keeping your face to the sunset, and you in a sewer trench, or to follow the evening star with all them buildings shutting you like a meadow mouse in a maze of soap boxes." "And what would you make of the big wheel part?" Con asked. "That is a puzzler surely," the other admitted. "It could be maybe the Wheel of Fortune, on top today and at the bottom tomorrow. That's the way of things in America, but I don't know." They soon became good friends, Con and the crooked little man. Martin Brennan was his name. They both preferred the small open-deck space allotted the steerage passengers to the stifling quarters below, and spent most of their time seated on the hatch, regardless of weather. Martin tried to teach Con to tie knots, bends, and hitches, but there were so many and so elaborate that it seemed well nigh hopeless. He did succeed, though in mastering a few that he hoped would be useful in construction work. "With all of them that I know," Martin said with a grin, "there's one that's always eluded me, and that's the one the priest ties. A good thing, though, for what fine girl would want to be hitched to a slew-sided thing the like of me?" The steerage was a jumble of races, mostly Irish and Scandinavians, a few Poles and Slavs, and some Germans. "Many a good crew I've sailed with that same mixture, Martin Brennan laughed. "Mixed squareheads, Polacks, and Dutchmen. A year or two now, and they'll all be good Americans. A wonderful country is America, like a great stew pot. The way you can be throwing in all them elements and turning out a fine, healthy dish. Barring a bit of scum, of course, that has to be whisked off." Con was idly scanning the crowd when all at once his eyes lit on the girl. "How blonde she is," was his first thought, and "how scrubbed she is," was his second. She was both. Great heavy braids of pale flaxen hair ringed her head. Her skin was the palest of pinks, her eyes the clear blue of moor ponds on a winter day. Her quaint peasant clothes were almost aggressive in their starched and laundered cleanliness. Fittingly enough, she was carrying a bucket of water, a large cake of soap, and a clean towel. She was followed by a small tow-headed boy of 3 or so, whom she led to the rail, stripped of jacket and shirt, and scrubbed vigorously. She scrubbed him to a fine pink polish with the towel, and then sent him skipping below. "Ach, this sea-water," she exclaimed, and she emptied the bucket into the scuppers. "For washing it is not good." "For fish to swim in and for ships to sail on," Martin said with a grin, "sea-water can't be beat." It is also handy for separating continents of the world, one from the other. Otherwise, it's no use at all. And how is it a young German girl, the like of you, is speaking English so good? She smiled pleasantly at the little man, but her eyes were mostly for Con. A long time we planned to come to America, so I study English in the Schule. It is very bad, no? Good as the Queen's, Con answered. And is it New York where you're staying? No, we go to Wisconsin. My Uncle Otto is there. You know Wisconsin? 'Tis no seaport, Martin said, scratching his head. To the west, I'm thinking, out in the middle of the country somewhere. By Chicago, I think, the girl said. My Uncle Otto has cows, many cows. We will make cheeses. My father is a fine cheesemaker. I will milk the cows. Are Indians in Wisconsin? I don't know, Con answered. This is my first trip. She disappeared below, but emerged shortly, her bucket filled with clothes, which she proceeded to scrub and hang on the rail to dry. If there is Indians in Wisconsin, Martin mused, they'd best be moving along or she'll be trying to scrub the red off them. Once she's finished bathing the cows. A pretty lass, though, in spite of her obsession for soap. She is so, Con agreed. The like of a wee, shiny figure I was seeing once in a shop window in Ballyneedon. The same pink cheeks on her, and blue eyes the size of doorknobs. I wish she was for New York. Well, Wisconsin is to the west, Martin chuckled. And what was it your Aunt's fortune was saying? Keep your face to the sunset and follow the evening star, and you'll come to Wisconsin, and get your ears washed. After that, Con saw a good deal of her. He met her father and mother, stout, kindly souls, who radiated goodwill. He met her 5 younger brothers and sisters, a tow-headed flight of steps of from 3 to 13 years, whose only English consisted of good morning and thank you. Often, when she was not scrubbing the younger ones, or after they had been put to bed below, she joined him on the hatch or at the rail. He had never talked much with girls before, and now, to his surprise, found it quite easy and most enjoyable. Her name, he learned, was Trudy. She was 16. They came from the Black Forest. Her father abhorred war, armies, violence of any sort. Grandfather had been killed in France in 1870. So, we come to America, she smiled. In America, one is free, no? Little Franz, Karl, and Heinrich would never be conscripted. Father would not have to leave his cattle and crops every summer to go on the maneuvers that he hated. Con, on his side, told her of his life in the village, of his mother and Aunt Honora and Grandfather Giblin, and of the younger ones. He talked of the peat cutting, and of fishing at night for the great river salmon, when one had to outwit not only the fish, but the gamekeepers as well. An easy, carefree life in a beautiful land, but always, just around the corner, the hunger. It is a hard thing, he said, to hear the young ones crying for the want of food, and to be digging the potatoes, and them all black and shriveled and slimy with the blight. Ja, she said quickly, I know. We have had the hunger too. But in America will be plenty, no? Uncle Otto says so. On the last evening out, she joined him at the rail as the ship plowed down the golden pathway that led to the setting sun. It was then that he told her of Aunt Honora's prophecy. It is a beautiful fortune, she said. Your fortune lies to the west. Wisconsin lies to the west, too. You will come to Wisconsin some day, no? I might, he laughed, and be finding you married to a fine fat Dutchman, with 6 young ones of your own to wash and a whole herd of cows to be milking. Nein, no, she said solemnly. I will wait, and you will follow the evening star, and you will come. It is your fortune. And where would I be finding you? He asked. Oh, in Wisconsin, she answered. Just ask anyone for my Uncle Otto.